Our brain uses sound as one of our five senses to interface with the real world. And we can see this at a physical level. When we listen to music, the neurons in our brain can fire in a different way. You can measure this change that music has on our brain. Neurons can fire faster or slower or in different parts of our brain. And when these neurons fire together, they produce this electric field around your brain. And that's something that we can measure to understand your brain activity. And this measurement is called EEG. So we can basically just take a voltmeter and put it on the surface of your brain, on your scalp, and then get an understanding of what your brain activity looks like. And this is an example of what it would look like. So it's basically just a signal of the voltage that's coming off of your brain. And so it becomes interesting to think, what would it look like if you had a famous music artist listen to their own music and then capture their brainwaves while they're doing that? It becomes a really unique piece of data that only they can produce. It's kind of like a neural fingerprint. And a month ago, I actually went to LA and I measured the brainwaves of some music artists listening to their own music. And they were telling me how listening to the song again brought up memories of how they produced the song, why they produced the song, and just all the memories that are associated with it. And that's something really unique that only that music artist can produce. And that's the idea behind these brainwave-generated NFTs, to create a visualization of the emotional state that music artists are going through while they're listening to their own music. So these are 3 examples of pieces I've created off of my own brainwaves. And you can see they're kind of like a map. They're not meant to just be abstract art. There's meaning behind every single position of every single node. So if you look at the color of these nodes, each one of the RGB values is mapped to a different mental state. So the more focused and attentive you are, the more red a node will be. And the more drowsy you are, the more green. And the more calm you are, the more blue it'll be. So if you take this node, for example, it's kind of like a bluish green, which means I was probably just like calm and sleepy, but not attentive at all. And the position of the node is based on how emotionally stimulated you were. So if we go back to the art, you can see that each node has a certain distance from the center of the sphere. And that distance is based on how emotionally stimulated you were. And in terms of emotional stimulation, like that may not make sense to some of you, but like if you think of a brick, like let's say I'm looking at a brick, that's not very emotionally stimulating. It's just a brick. It's not doing anything. Versus if I look at something like a firework, that's much more emotionally stimulating. And the shape of these nodes may seem kind of random, but it's a little bit of an Easter egg. Since I'm hosting these NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain, I actually took all the brainwave data associated with a certain piece of time and ran that through the same hash function that the Ethereum blockchain uses, which is Keccak 256. So these brainwave NFTs are a literal encrypted representation of that artist's brainwaves. And lastly, the size of these nodes is based on your heart rate. So the higher your heart rate is, the bigger these nodes will be. And between measuring emotional stimulation, brainwave data, and heart rate, you get a really interesting representation of an artist's emotional state while they're listening to their own music. So we can actually go back to these 3 pieces and read these like maps. So if you look at the first one, this is recorded from me listening to Pompeii by Bastille. And this is, like, if you haven't heard the song, it's a very upbeat and very powerful song. And you can see that in the brainwaves. It's very magenta, so there's a lot of reds in there. And that's because when you're listening to a really hyped up song, you're just gonna be more attentive and more focused. And that color just completely took over the entire piece. And you can see that part at the beginning where there's a huge arc. It kind of looks like a piece of bread. That's because I hadn't listened to the song in a while, so just hearing that powerful intro was just really emotionally stimulating. And if we look at the next piece, this is Everything I Wanted by Billie Eilish. This is a very calm and soothing song. And again, you can see that throughout the piece. It's very green, because it was just making me a little bit more drowsy and a little bit more calm. And you'll see that this piece, a lot of the arcs are a lot bigger. That just means I was more emotionally stimulated during the song. And that's because I just get goosebumps when I listen to this song. And that's something you can see in the piece. And the last one is Let Her Go by Passenger. This one keeps switching between soothing and focused parts, which is why there's a lot more variety in the color and just the shape of the arcs in the piece. And the nice thing is I've created this dashboard where you can just sit down, hit record, and create these music NFTs. So you can just create them on the spot. It's not a really long process or anything. And that's why I'm going to an NFT art auction next month, and I'm hoping to actually record the brainwaves of people attending the auction and then minting NFTs of their brainwaves for them on the spot. And now it becomes a much more personalized NFT. So these aren't NFTs you would probably want to flip. They're more just NFTs that are like a representation of you and a much more personalized one that you'd keep just to show to people. And the ambition behind this project, at least for the NFTs that are based off of music artists listening to their own brainwaves, is to provide value to both the music artist and the people holding it. So if you like some very famous artists, usually if they have any merchandise, it would sell out, or even concert tickets can sell out. So the idea would be that if you own an NFT of their brainwaves while they listen to one of their songs, you could use that as a concert ticket, or even use that to get exclusive merchandise. But I think it's more interesting when you do this with artists who aren't as famous yet, when you do it with emerging artists. Because like I remember when I was a kid and I saw Shawn Mendes like teaching guitar on Disney Channel. He hadn't even released an album yet, but like I saw who he was. No one really knew if he would make it. Imagine buying his NFT back then, right? It would probably be pretty cheap, but if you did, you would have on-chain proof that you supported this guy before he became famous, and you would have an NFT that grew in value a lot more because he's way more famous now. And this is like kind of like a season's pass holding for music artists. You get the full experience. You can get concerts, merchandise, everything. And the best part is you could also help financially support artists that are still emerging because they get a portion of the mint and they continue to get royalties from people selling these. And it just becomes another income stream for them. Another idea for this was to create much more unique popes for concerts. So imagine if you have a music artist performing at the concert and then they have this headset on recording their brainwave data. Now you've kind of encapsulated that moment in time because that's never going to happen again. They're not going to perform at that venue at that time anymore. But it kind of creates this, like a pope, right? The whole point of a pope is to create an NFT that shows you were at an event. But when you use brainwaves to create that pope, I feel like that visualization is a lot more special. And like that's what I'm trying to do right now on stage. You see I have this headset on. This is actually recording my brainwaves while I'm giving this presentation. I have my Apple Watch on right now recording my heart rate. And I've recorded all the data that I need to produce one of those NFTs. And when I step off stage, I'm actually going to go and produce that NFT and mint it on OpenSea for people to get. Yeah, thanks.